Coming up today, South Korea and the United States take stock of their defense preparedness a day after Washington flies a B-52 bomber over the Korean peninsula in response to North Korea's recent nuclear test. The United States is preparing a range of diplomatic and economic measures to stifle North Korea's capabilities, but Russia urges Washington to coordinate its measures with all the related parties. Plus, with an electoral map to devise and a slew of economy-related bills to pass, lawmakers get to work as January's extraordinary session begins at the National Assembly. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Monday, the 11th of January. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. And we start with the latest on Seoul and Washington's joint response to North Korea's latest nuclear tests. South Korea's chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the top U.S. military official in Korea met earlier today at South Korea's Air Force Command and U.S. 7th Air Force in Osan. To check up on their joint defense readiness. This comes a day after the U.S. sent a B-52 bomber flanked by other U.S. and South Korean jets on a low-level flight across South Korea. The flight was a strong show of force against Pyongyang, of course, but also a clear indication of Washington's commitment to the defense of its allies. Let's get the latest now from our Kim Hyun-bin, who's standing by at the Ministry of National Defense in Seoul. Hyun-bin, tell us about this morning's meeting.
That's right, Mark. The two commanders visited Korean and U.S. Air Force Base in Osan earlier this morning to inspect the preparedness of its military and to better counter any provocations from North Korea. The two commanders briefed on the current situation, and the KoC detects and distinguishes all airborne craft on the Korean peninsula, and if enemy planes are detected, it takes immediate countermeasures. Now, the commanders also acts as the Korea-U.S. Joint Air Force Command Cell during wartime.
Yes, Hyun-bin, and that is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Lee Soon-jin, and U.S. Forces Korea Commander General Curtis Scaparotti. They were the two officials at that meeting. And we also hear that North Korea has set up more loudspeakers along the border to counter South Korea's speakers. Tell us about that.
That's correct. After South Korea resumed their propaganda broadcast 2 days after North Korea's fourth nuclear test, the number of propaganda broadcasts in North Korea has increased significantly in recent days. Now, South Korea currently operates 11 loudspeakers intermittently throughout the day along different areas of the border. Now, military officials say that Pyongyang initially countered with 2 loudspeakers, but has now matched the South in number. Officials added that North Korea's speakers have low output, which leads them to believe that the purpose is to cancel out the propaganda messages from the South to prevent them from being heard. Now, South Korea's defense ministry said a little over an hour ago that currently there are no signs of immediate threat from the north, and reassured that its troops are on the border are on the highest state of alert. And the ministry added that if North Korea decides to attack the speakers, it will retaliate with more than triple the force. Back to you.
Thank you, Hyun-bin, for that report. Now, there's perhaps no finer example of U.S. military power than the B-52, and its appearance over South Korea will certainly register in Pyongyang. On top of this, the United States is expected to use the full force of its diplomatic and economic powers this week to punish North Korea for its latest grave provocation. Geunhye has the details.
In addition to sending a B-52 bomber over South Korea, tough measures against North Korea's recent nuclear test are coming down the line from the United States this week on the military, diplomatic, and congressional front. Sources say that as early as Monday, the U.S. House of Representatives could vote on long-delayed legislation that will expand sanctions on Pyongyang. The bill has strong bipartisan support and would include sanctions on North Korean banks that facilitate its nuclear activities and authorize penalties on individuals or entities providing North Korea with hard cash. Washington's approach has garnered criticism from Russia, though. Moscow says the U.S. should refrain from acting unilaterally, with the Russians expressing specific concern about the B-52 flyover. The U.S., however, has been emphasizing the need to cooperate with Russia, along with South Korea, China, and Japan in isolating North Korea. In an interview with CNN, White House Chief of Staff Dennis McDonough also said that North Korea won't be able to join the international community without abandoning its nuclear weapons, adding that it'll remain an outcast if it doesn't meet its requirements. This comes as efforts toward a new UN Security Council resolution on North Korea are ongoing, with the U.S. stressing the importance of China's role in its implementation. But the effectiveness of UN sanctions continues to be called into question. The Associated Press reports that a panel dealing with UN sanctions on North Korea has found no new cases of existing sanctions being enforced since the latest round of sanctions was imposed on North Korea in 2013. On top of that, fewer than 40 of the UN's 193 members have actually handed in reports on the sanctions implementation. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Yes, and we have some news just coming in from the presidential office of Cheongwade. That is that President Park Geunhye will address the nation on Wednesday morning, this ahead of her annual press conference. The exact time and contents have not been released as of yet, but her statement will likely include the administration's response to Pyongyang's claim of a successful hydrogen bomb test last week. President Park has called on the nation to carry on with business as usual and pledged to closely cooperate with the international community to sternly respond to the North's latest provocation. It's also likely to stress national unity and the swift approval of economy-related bills at the National Assembly. And Korea's National Assembly has kicked off its January session on this Monday, but the rival parties are continuing to wrangle over the passage of contentious bills and devising a new electoral map for Korea. The ruling Saenuri Party has become increasingly intent on passing government-led economic bills without bipartisan consent by urging the National Assembly Speaker to use his authority to table the bills himself. The main opposition and newly renamed Minju Party of Korea has denounced the ruling party's efforts. It says such a move would be undemocratic and a violation of the legislative process. The rival parties also need to reach a compromise over the constituency bill, as the current electoral map became invalid at the end of last year on New Year's Eve, and a general election is set for mid-April. Korean shares traded sharply lower on Monday, with the benchmark index falling below the 1900 level during early trading. And as of 11:50 a.m. local time, roughly 17 minutes ago, the benchmark Kospi shed over 0.6% from Friday's close. Shares also opened lower in China, with the Shanghai Composite Index down more than 0.9%. As of 11:50 a.m. Seoul time as well. This comes after data shows that Beijing's consumer price growth posted its lowest level in 6 years last year. Wall Street also recorded losses on Friday. The Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500, they both closed down over 1%. And markets around the world have been pretty much in turmoil due to the stock rout in China over concerns of slowing growth in the world's second largest economy. Staying with financial news, and the average daily trading volume in Korea's bond market hit a record high in 2015 due to the ongoing global uncertainties. According to the Korea Exchange, the daily turnover of bonds averaged nearly $6 billion last year. That's up almost 27% from a year earlier. The daily trading volume has been on a steady rise for the past several years, with the exception of 2013. Experts say investors fled to the relative safety of bonds due to changes in interest rates and market uncertainties. Treasuries accounted for nearly 96% of total bonds traded in the market, with the benchmark 5-year government bonds taking up the largest share of over 50%. Now, Hyundai Motors' high-end Genesis sedan has been winning over more and more drivers in the United States. The Korean automaker says it sold almost 25,000 units of the second-generation Genesis in the US in 2015, and that is an impressive 30% jump from the year before, 33%. Now, Genesis was the third best-selling mid-size model in the US, taking up more than 10% market share, placing behind the Mercedes-Benz E-Class and BMW 5 Series. Now, since its release in the US in 2010, Genesis has ranked among the top 10 best-selling luxury models, maintaining a market share of around 7%. Now, a new survey has been released that shows how much Koreans eat, drink and sleep. And on the whole, it shows Koreans love their coffee, their food, and also a good sit down. Our Son Jong-in has the details.
Newly released statistics from the Health Ministry and the Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention show Korean adults drink nearly 2 cups of coffee a day. According to a survey on 3,400 Koreans aged between 19 and 64, an adult drinks 12 cups of coffee a week on average, or 1.7 cups every single day. The rate is similar to how often Koreans eat rice. That figure comes to 2.4 times a day. The survey also showed that around a third of adults were overweight, but 2/3 of them were attempting to lose a few kilos. The poll found that 32% of adult Koreans were above the optimal weight, meaning their BMI measured by dividing a person's weight by the square of his or her height in meters was 25 or higher. 64% of them have tried to lose weight. The data also found that obesity was more prevalent among old and low-income Koreans. The survey also found that 1 in 3 Koreans did not eat dinner with their family. Only 65% of respondents said they had dinner with their loved ones. This figure has been on a downward trend since 2005, when it stood at 76%. The latest statistics also found Koreans spend around 7.5 hours a day sat down and get nearly 7 hours sleep a night. On a worrying note, 1 in 7 drivers confessed to driving under the influence more than once in a year. Son Jong-in, Arirang News.
Now, world food prices fell nearly 20% in 2015 on the back of a strong US dollar and abundant supplies. This marks the 4th consecutive year of decline as well. The UN Food and Agricultural Organization's food price index averaged 154.1 points in December, down 1% from the previously revised 155.6 points. Now, the latest figure was 19.1% below the average in 2014. The index, according to experts, was driven down by abundant supplies amid a slowing global economy. In December itself, the number was dragged down by a decrease in prices of meat, dairy and cereals. Experts say the chances of a recovery in commodity prices are slim in the short term at least. Paris has been paying tribute to all the people killed there in terror attacks over the past year. The special ceremony on Sunday remembered the 147 victims. The service was held in one of the city's main squares, a square that has become a symbol of Parisian solidarity since the attacks, which began on January 7, 2015 with the Charlie Hebdo attack. Now, tributes were led by French President François Hollande, and a plaque was unveiled in memory of all those people killed. France remains under a state of emergency following the terror attacks in November last year, in which gunmen linked to the Islamic State militant group murdered 130 people in the French capital. Now, in health news, cancer cells get their energy to multiply through fermentation. In an attempt to prevent them doing so, a team of Korean researchers are developing a new cancer treatment method that restrains the fermentation process. Our Park Se-young has a story.
Beer is made of wheat or barley, and yeast converts the glucose in the wort to alcohol. This fermentation process is carried out in the absence of oxygen. Cancer cells use the same process to produce energy. Without using oxygen, cancer cells convert sugar into lactic acid. Healthy human cells produce energy using oxygen through respiration. Oxygen-based metabolism produces more energy, but the cost to produce molecules for respiration are twice those needed to ferment glucose. Also, the byproducts from the fermentation process can be used to form cancer cells during research, making the method even more cost-effective. This study could even have implications in identifying potential targets in treating cancer.
If we block the metabolism of cancer cells in collaboration with existing anti-cancer drugs,
it will boost their effectiveness.
Fermentation does not only occur in foods and drinks such as kimchi and beer, it may even provide a new strategy to treat cancer. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
Now, the relatively mild weather we've enjoyed in Korea over recent days has come to a shuddering halt, with icy winds and temperatures plunging well below freezing. And frigid northwesterly winds meant the century temperature, wind chill in other words, in parts of the country was far below minus 10 degrees Celsius this morning. A cold wave warning remains in place in northern Geunhye and Gangwon-do provinces. The daytime high in Seoul today will top out at 0 degrees Celsius, but it will feel even colder with the wind, with the mercury forecast to plunge to minus 9 degrees Celsius in Seoul overnight and even colder elsewhere. Drivers, pedestrians and cyclists are being warned to take extra care on icy roads on Tuesday morning. With that, let's take a look at the weather around the world. Well, those are stories we are following on this Monday afternoon here in Seoul. We do hope your week is off to a great start. Until next time, goodbye.